Brand new hat. Came in today via Lids. $18 Canadian on sale. I think it is the sharpest looking hat I've ever owned. Along with the Minnesota one I got today, but I'll sport that one tomorrow with my Minnesota North Stars jersey on my day off. Sorry that I'm so late tonight. Today's been a busy day. Yvonne's son Malachi is his birthday today, so there's a lot of running around to do. Um, and I mean, it's not really quite an apology. It's just a hey, I know I'm late. These things happen. I thought I'd take a look at if the playoffs started today, because that's always fun to do. And just discuss a little bit about who's where. Okay. So in the East, if the playoffs started today, you would have Ottawa playing Tampa Bay, Ottawa having home ice, and that's in the Atlantic Division. And also you'd have Montreal playing New Jersey. That's right, boys and girls, New Jersey. Because of the fact they've played one less game than Boston, and even though they have less regulation or overtime wins than Boston, Boston would win that tiebreaker. Yeah, I'll go ahead with New Jersey because I don't have a whole lot of faith in Boston um, doing much from here on. So, yeah, Ottawa, Tampa, that'd be a fantastic series. Montreal and Jersey would also be a good series, and it would make Canada feel better to see Canadian teams back in the playoffs. The New York Rangers, finishing first in their division, would play Columbus. And Pittsburgh would play Washington. So if you're a Capitals fan, oh, that's gotta hurt, knowing you'd end up playing Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh hasn't been, their goal differential's -1. The Rangers is +29. So even though they're only 4 points apart, it's clear that the Rangers are more dominant. But we'll see. Oh, this is funny. Brian Burke apparently denying rumors on Dougie Hamilton being on the trading block for Calgary. Pardon my French, but I guess the quote here is people have no goddamn idea what they're talking about. When Burke says stuff like that, guy's getting traded. Just I'm just saying when he gets really mad, a lot of the time there's two reasons. One, he could legitimately be saying this guy isn't available. He could legitimately be saying that. Or the guy is available and he doesn't want people to know he's available. So a GM somewhere has let it slip, hey, they're shopping Dougie Hamilton, and he's mad because it got out there. One or the other. Burke's funny that way. He plays it close to the vest, and even though he's not the GM in Calgary, he still talks the talk. He does look more and more like a vampire, though, as the years go by. He looks genuinely terrifying. All right, now in the West, in the Central Division, you have St. Louis and Minnesota would play against each other. That would be a fantastic series. I really enjoy watching that. And then Chicago would play the second seed among the um, wild cards, which would be LA. So you'd have the Kings and the Blackhawks in the first round. Wow. That would be awesome. I have to say, I would love that series. Pacific Division, you'd have Anaheim and Edmonton, which would be a bloodbath. And I don't mean that in terms of saying like, oh, Anaheim would kill them. No, no. I mean these teams would want to kill each other. You have the Anaheim we love to cheat Ducks on one side, and they have Zach Kassian and Milan Lucic, who aren't known for being good losers on the other. Both teams really chippy. They don't like each other either. That would be ugly. And then San Jose, for finishing first, would get to play Nashville. And Nashville had apparently the best November they've ever had. They've got themselves back into the conversation. Hockey News said that Nashville right now is a top cup contender. They're basically in the top 4 or 5. I think that's a little bit early to be calling them a top contender for the cup. And this is coming from a guy who picked them to be first in their division. And I still think they probably will finish first by the end of the season, but it's still too early to tell. But it's interesting looking at the playoffs, isn't it? Because you look at the teams that are out, and why don't we take a look at the teams that are out right now? Boston, downward trajectory. Philly, who knows? Philly is very, very unreliable. Toronto, Toronto is a fascinating case. Imagine if Toronto skipped over New Jersey and Toronto and Montreal was a first-round matchup. Yes, the rest of Canada would riot. It'd be like, oh no, we have to watch Toronto Montreal for possibly 7 more games. But honestly, it would be so great for the NHL just to see those two teams against each other for the first time in forever. Florida's dug themselves into a hole. I know they're only 1 point out of the playoffs, but at this point in the season, it is a proven fact that if you're out of the playoffs, it is really hard to dig your way back in. Detroit is another one that's been sort of digging around and potentially falling out of the playoff hunt. Carolina, I don't see them getting into it. Buffalo, we'll see with Eichel back. Eichel being back seems to have improved their fortunes already, as shown with the 5-4 win over Ottawa. But I'll hold off until Eichel's been back for about 10 games before I'll say yes, Buffalo's good or no, they're not. And the Islanders are, they've won 2 in a row, but there's trouble. There is trouble on Long Island or in Brooklyn or Queens or wherever they end up playing. Teams missing the playoffs in the West. There's Dallas. I have no faith in Dallas whatsoever right now, despite the fact that I have a Jamie Benn Funko Pop that's sitting on a shelf behind me. You can't see it from here. Can you see it? Is my lamp in the way? Is my lamp in the way? Yes, it is. There's Jamie Benn. There you go. Jamie Benn on a shelf. They have the Funko Pops for the NHL guys. The other ones I was looking at, I'm probably going to get Henrik Lundqvist at some point, and probably Carey Price, and that'll probably be it. I would get Connor McDavid, but I don't know. I'm looking at them and going, well, which one do I really want? Morgan Riley sold out pretty quick, which I'm surprised by, genuinely. But yeah. So that's a side note, just because I mentioned Dallas. Winnipeg looks to be digging themselves into a bit of a hole. Yes, they're only 1 point out, but the teams ahead of them all have multiple games in hand. Calgary, I don't understand Calgary. I genuinely don't understand Calgary. They've played 26 games. Nashville and LA have both played 22. So the fact that Calgary's 1 point back, they're going to need some help from the teams ahead of them. The teams ahead of them have to lose some games. Vancouver, I know Vancouver's won 2 in a row. I know Canucks fans are probably getting a little bit excited, seeing them finally showing some upward momentum, but I just don't see it. I don't think it's panic time either in terms of their standing, and I'll get into that in a bit here. Colorado, I don't know what the hell's going with Colorado. And Arizona, I'm genuinely a little bit baffled by Arizona. Although in the last 10 games, they've been 1 game above 500. Although 3 of those points are loser points. But in terms of standings right now, the Canucks are actually 26th overall in the NHL. And this is where it gets interesting because Boston's 17th, Philly's 18th, Toronto's 19th, Florida's 20th, Detroit's 21st, Dallas is actually 22nd overall. Then Winnipeg, Calgary, Carolina, Vancouver, Buffalo, Islanders, Colorado, Arizona. Part of what happens here is that there are so many 3-point games in the NHL now that moving up becomes virtually impossible. And if you're out of the playoffs right now, like look at Vancouver, they have to pass Calgary, Winnipeg, and Dallas, and then they have to pass one of the teams that are currently in the playoffs in order to get into it. What worked to their advantage against Minnesota is that Darcy Kemper played. The difference in numbers between Devin Dubnyk and Darcy Kemper are sad. I'm not sure why Minnesota hasn't considered ditching Darcy Kemper and picking up any backup they can find. I mean, you look at what Mike Condon has done for Ottawa, and that they jettisoned Andrew Hammond because Condon's a good backup. There are other good backups around the NHL. I'm very surprised that we haven't seen Minnesota doing the same thing because Dubnyk needs to rest. He does. And you need to know that when he rests, you're not necessarily going to lose that game. Like Kemper's got 2 wins, 2 losses, and an overtime loss. I get it. It's not a horrible record. But you look at that .897 save percentage, or you look at that goals against average over 3. I don't understand. Like the difference between the two goalies is just night and day. And there are other goaltenders in the league who are capable. I look at what Anders Nilsson's done in limited work. Very good goaltender. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but in terms of hockey results, every game matters. And part of the reason it matters is because this is mush. I look at these teams, I look at these standings, and there's a lot of mush in here. And what I mean by that is parity has become such a major thing and such a selling point for the game that there really isn't a lot to choose. Like you look at teams 17 through 30, you can name off a strength on any of them, even the Canucks. And I've given the Canucks a hard time a lot this year, but I will say this. They've got some of the hardest working players on this roster that they've had in a while. And I mean guys like Hutton, Trampkin, Goodbranson. I will give Goodbranson that. Um, Obviously up front you got Horvat and you got Sutter. You've got guys who work really hard and appreciate every minute they're on the ice. And they clearly aren't the kind of guys who have had to go to their head or feel they're entitled. And I'm glad the Canucks don't have those guys who feel entitled. It's part of the reason I didn't like Ryan Kessler with the group, because he seemed to have that entitlement feeling to him, which will work fine in Anaheim because they're supposed to be a contending team. But when you're on a rebuild, you don't want a guy out there who feels entitled, because these are guys who also sometimes feel like, oh, I'm entitled to be with a contender and I shouldn't be with these dregs. And it's like, maybe if you worked harder on making the team better, the team would be better. But yeah, that's sort of what occurs to me with this is looking. I mean, none of these teams are bad. You even look at the bottom, Carolina, or not Carolina. Well, okay, Carolina, Vancouver, Buffalo, Islanders, Colorado, Arizona. I have subscribers to these channels for any one of those teams who would be definitely in favor of. All right, I got interrupted there by a small child who decided to come in. But the cat's in hiding. Oh, how things have changed in a couple of months, my friends. Um, I did want to mention tonight's game. Calgary shuts out Toronto. A matchup between two teams that currently are outside the playoffs. Um, Chad Johnson, at some point, does he now become the starter? I mean, he's playing the games. Obviously, he's got the numbers. I feel bad for Elliott. I mean, Elliott hasn't played very well, but I honestly feel bad for the kid. You know, he gets out of St. Louis, where he was platooning and he wasn't really the starter, and his numbers were really good, but he couldn't really get away from Jake Allen. So he goes to Calgary and he has a clear role before the season starts as the starter, and Johnson's the backup, right? Here we are, end of November, 1st of December tomorrow, and Johnson's stolen his job. And Johnson's putting up fantastic numbers tonight. That's already his third shutout, I believe. 8 wins, 4 losses, and an overtime loss. And his goals against average is riding around 2. So, yeah. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments about the current standings, the playoff matchups. Which of the matchups that I just said would take place? Which one would you say, oh, that's great? And are there any you look at and roll your eyes and go, Pittsburgh and Washington again? Like, does that happen? I don't personally have that feeling. Like when I see rivals going at it year after year after year, I'm excited. I'm like, oh, they're gonna meet up again. This is gonna be great because that that hatred is there. It's inbred into the game. It's right away. There's no waiting 2 or 3 games in the series for that hatred to pick up. It's immediate. I love rivalries. That's why I love the fact they've gone back to divisional playoffs. The wild card thing's nice too, but the divisional playoffs is really fantastic. You're guaranteed 4 first round matchups where teams hate each other right at the get go, and it's gonna be something to watch this year, I think. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you think. Who's your biggest surprise, both good and bad? For me, the biggest surprise, good, is Ottawa, and I'm glad for Ottawa. And I took a lot of flack during the summer for it, but and apparently Ottawa fans are still a little skeptical, and I agree. because it's still early. But so far, so good. In terms of being disappointed in a team's performance, it would have been Nashville in October. For right now, Calgary's picking it up, but man, they gotta keep winning, and they gotta keep playing Chad Johnson, because Elliott, for whatever reason, it's not there. So, you know, while I feel for Johnson, you have to win now. You're an NHL team, especially a Canadian NHL team coming out of last year. You have to win now. So good on them for going with the right goaltender, and good on you guys for tuning into a video that I'm posting at almost midnight Eastern time. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all again tomorrow or later. I'll probably do another video before bed.